So Jay, remember a little while ago we got a strike from YouTube. I believe maybe it was twice actually, because we tried to do a re-upload about a certain giant beings that are called giants. We did a video
Yeah.
on it. There wasn't really anything in there that stuck out and that should get us. It was, I believe, certain medical kind of information that they were attacking for some reason, but it wasn't even about anything like that.
Hmm.
So I've been seeing these videos and I wanted to bring up this quote about Abraham Lincoln and stuff and how people have written articles. So I thought maybe if we read the article, this specific article, that we wouldn't get completely bombed from the YouTube overlords. You know what I'm saying?
You never know.
All right. So this article reads: In the summer of 1520, the Spanish expedition led by Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan was well into its circumnavigation of the globe. By the time they reached the shores of Argentina, they had already encountered several native tribes. But there was something special about the natives of this land. In the account from Antonio Pigafetta, the voyage's official chronicler, would capture the imaginations of the Westerners for years to come. According to his journal, the natives of Patagonia were giants. Myths and legends of giants go back through every culture in every corner of the world, just like witches. And in many cases, the mythological aspect of these giants is obvious. Take, for example, Atlas, the giant from the Greek mythology who was tasked holding the world on his shoulders. But sometimes the stories aren't so heavily exaggerated, and there is even evidence that giants did once walk the earth. In the 1800s, as European settlers continued to expand west across the United States, they started coming across earthen mounds that had been constructed by native inhabitants of North America. The settlers started excavating the mounds with little regard for the native cultures who had built them for religious, ceremonial, and burial purposes. And the sensational headlines regarding what was found in those mounds all reported one thing: skeletons, giant skeletons. But these weren't just a few obscure papers. These were reputable sources, let's put quotes on that, like the New York Times and Scientific American. Even Abraham Lincoln references the giants in 1848 during a visit to Niagara Falls, saying the eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mountains of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. According to the numerous articles published during this time, the skeletons were regularly found to be between 7 and 10 feet tall, and some even reported taller individuals like the one mentioned in this New York Times article from 1885. If the whole frame is in proportion to two thigh bones that were found, their owner must have stood 14 feet high. A representative of the Smithsonian Institution is here investigating the curious relic. So it's interesting because a lot of people like to argue no, Abraham Lincoln was talking about these dinosaurs that they allegedly were digging up. However, the newspapers and everything were talking about humans or not humans, something else that's like humans, bipedal, giant something
Yeah.
that look just like
Is it
us.
is it interesting it mentions the Smithsonian?
Uh huh.
I can't pronounce that word. Because they're the guys that are primarily responsible for taking these things and like hiding it from the world and never mentioning it again.
Yeah, they take them and they're like, "Oh, let's investigate this," and then boom, it's gone. It's wiped out of
Yeah.
existence, and no one ever talks about it again. It's very interesting. So, what did they know back then, and what were they trying to cover up? Is my question. The fact that it was being investigated by a representative of the Smithsonian may not seem out of the ordinary, but it appears to be a theme seen throughout these reports. Some believe that the Smithsonian was involved in covering up these artifacts, which were often surrendered to the museum for further study. This theory is supported by the fact that no follow-up reports, studies, or exhibitions followed the initial reports of these anomalous discoveries. And the accounts became even more compelling when you consider how many oral traditions of the Native American tribes in those regions tell of a race of giants. So that's pretty interesting right there. Let's cover it up. Let's deny it. Let's say it's all stories, even though they they just kind of forget about it and stop talking about it. But the news reports are
Yeah.
there. The president talks about it. The natives that were here actively were talking about it. But no, don't look this way. It didn't happen. Just just give me a shot on YouTube and tell me I'm being medical misinforming people about something they
Yeah.
say isn't real, right? So, in a more recent discovery, 205 graves were unearthed in China's Shandong province. The archaeological dig found that a significant number of these men stood around the 6 foot mark, with the tallest man standing at 6 foot 3. This may not seem incredibly tall by today's standards. After all, the average height of today's NBA player is around 6'7". But 5,000 years ago, when these Longshan people were still alive, they would have loomed over their Neolithic contemporaries, who were much shorter by comparison. The Central American Mayans, for example, had an average male height of 5'2" and an average female height of 4'8". So they found some tall people up in China.
That sounds like Asian height.
What do you mean?
That sounds more like an Asian height. The Mayans. Are they Asian?
The kind of Asian, I believe.
I know they're South American, but did they originate from Asia?
Probably.
That's interesting.
I
I
believe
gotta look that up.
I believe they have like the slant to their eyes, or they did. See, back then it was, I mean, everyone was different and stuff. Like it was from all over the place. And yeah, it was interesting when you go look at it. So that would have been a long, long time ago. 5,000 years ago. Who knows? So the giants of Longshan were usually tall, unusually tall for their time, but their height wasn't out of the realm of what we consider possible within the established narrative of our past. So what happens when we find evidence that could completely upend that narrative? In the 1960s, miners of the Otavi Mountains of northern Namibia discovered the fossilized segment of a femur. The mineralized bone was turned over to Philip Tobias, the later paleoanthropologist from South Africa. It remains in his vault at Wits University in Johannesburg to this day. In Michael Tellinger's video posted in 2013, he visits Professor Francis Thackeray at the university to view the impressive artifact. The professor identifies the mineralized bone as having belonged to a Homo sapien. And when he brings out an average-sized femur for comparison, the difference is clear. The fossilized femur appears to be at least twice the size of a normal one. But despite the abnormal size, there seems to be no outside interest in studying or dating the artifact.
No interest, huh? Or they were paid or told not to.
Yeah, very interesting. So there's no interest. Don't look this way. You would think, I mean, they put dinosaur bones together and it's a huge thing, but you find a human femur that's twice the size of a normal one and no
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah.
So why? Why would you not want to show true history or the past or whatever? Wouldn't these be scientific like discoveries that they could use and find out stuff? That's usually what they do with these kinds of things.
It would be, but if they don't want you to know, no,
Yeah, it's kind of like
I don't know.
the Sasquatch stuff, right? But allegedly there's Sasquatch and then there was like red-haired giants in the US. And those have
Yeah.
been talked about all over the world as well. Like one story that the Sasquatch and the people, the natives actually worked together to kill off or fight off the giants that once roamed here. Because they're even bigger than Sasquatch, allegedly. Very interesting.